Okay, can you hear me though?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So just give me a second. Right. So if you have any POIs, kindly do well to unmute yourself and ask. I don't think I'll be looking at the text area. And so please do well to unmute and ask, but please do it properly so you don't just unmute incessantly. Okay, please. Apologies. Okay, so I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, ladies and gentlemen, the debate before the House reads that this House will actively encourage women not to have children. Now, we have to understand the context within which the debate is set. That is to say that these are properly set in areas where women are not given a chance to exercise the rights that have been entrusted into them. So this is more like a social justice motion, which gives us the ability to probe issues regarding, justice towards women and what has been done in that particular regard that discourages women to live fully the kind of rights that they've been given in that regard. So we think this debate should be centered around, first of all, identifying the injustice done to women, but secondly, identifying which model best fits this particular problem, which in our case is better fit to, first of all, actively encourage women not to have children. Now, to actively do something means that there has been a persistent activity that has underlined that particular action. For instance, if this House would actively want to ban the use of cigarettes by young people, it is to say that the House has recognized the incessant use of cigarettes by young people in that particular regard, which is obviously taking away lives and taking away people's inherent rights not to harm other people. So we think it's very important that this House prioritizes the idea of actively encouraging women not to have children. That's not to say that we are not in favor of giving birth or we are not in favor of procreation, which shouldn't be the fulcrum of this debate. And we highly encourage every other team to stay within the context. Things about procreation, of course, we think procreation is good, but to the extent to which these kinds of things are not necessarily from the will and intent of the women, and erstwhile come from the back of what society explicitly wants these women to do and to behave in what manner, we think that particular thing is very, very bad. We think that is what this debate is about. Framing, characterization, and context has been given in this debate. We are set to proceed. Panel, note, the problem with injustices done to women spans out over a period of so many years, right? We're talking about historical precedences that go beyond a century, 2 centuries, etc. That means that there has been a conscious effort to suppress the innate rights of women to have a total owning of their own bodies. What it means is that, for instance, in African cultures, women obviously are told that when you have children or when you give the leeway for your husband to have children with you, that becomes the crown of your womanhood. Panel, we think that idea in itself is very bad. So the way we tackle that injustice, panel, we think is the issue or the use of active encouragement of women not to engage in things like having children, right? But secondly, identifying the problem. We say that the problem doesn't just necessarily span out of the fact that society or some societies deem it fit for women to behave in that particular manner. But secondly, we think women are being socialized into thinking that that system is what's best for them. How do we counter the system? That is what the debate again is about. But panel, what is the model we propose to you from opening governments, right? We say that actively encouraging women doesn't necessarily mean we are totally restricting them. Actively encouraging them basically means that we're going to be employing things like the use of serious educational or education measures that obviously allow them to buy into the idea of having total ownership of their bodies. But secondly, it's also with the idea of lobbying for government policies to be put in place to break that system of feminine oppression and taking away the rights of women to have the total control of their own bodies and have a say on whether or not they don't want to have children. Now, panel, we think this characterization and modeling is very important to endure for a very sane debate as we'll be having it today, right? So, some very sane arguments, right? How childbirth is used as a premium for feminine accomplishments, and this is very peculiar in an African context. But secondly, how to fight the problem of female suppression in countries that have prioritized the need for women to see childbirth or procreation as a crown for feminism or as a crown for womanhood. Panel, we say on the first argument, how childbirth is used as a premium for feminine accomplishments. Panel, we think it's very important that if every single individual is recognized as a human being who owns the rights to their own bodies, but secondly, has rights enshrined in them, not necessarily constitutional or legal rights, but natural rights to say that I want to do this and I want to do that. We think it's also in the same light and very important that women have the same control over their own bodies. Secondly, we think the issue on self-actualization should not be a premise that is based on just legal or like constitutional rights given to women, or secondly, on social statutes that women find themselves in. That is to say that women should have like that leeway to say, I am self-actualized not because I gave birth or not because I satisfied what society expected me to do, but I self-actualized because this is what I really wanted to do inherently and per the will that I have in that particular regard. Panel, we say in such instances, we serve the need of women with better like the interest they have, especially when it comes to self-actualization and self-fulfilling tendencies. And thirdly, we still fight the idea of allowing people to dictate for women in that particular instance. We think we seek better justice for women in a world that has suppressed their rights and taking away their will to like take action when they have to. We think it's important. POI shoot.
Right. So if you say that womanhood should not be limited to having children, don't you think that certain women think that that is a valid conceptualization of womanhood in response to all the other forms of like womanhood?
Panel, that is okay. So let me answer your question by giving this example. If someone actively encourages for feminism to exist in Africa, it doesn't necessarily mean you are forcing them to eschew their will not to subscribe to feminism. That is in the same way, if we actively engage in this act of encouraging women not to have children, we're not taking away that will of other women who would obviously want to have kids. But no, we don't think that is actually the case, right? Some women believe that definitely they would want to have children, which will be a crown on like whatever success they want at the end of the day. We also believe that for women who don't have the rights and will to choose whether or not they would want to procreate, would want to serve the interest of those women, and even more for others who want more education, want to understand the systems that work for them. We think it's important that we take that into consideration, right? But secondly, how to fight the problem of like feminine suppression or the suppression of feminine rights in countries that fight against women's rights in particular. Panel, we think it's very important that we take radical stances to ensure that for long, when the issue has been about having discourses and about talking about which system is best fit, we think time is up for us to practicalize the conversations we have on grounds. So it is to say that if we say women have rights, then women must have rights entirely. Panel note, a social justice debate must first come with a problem and then a justice solution to it. We provide this for you from opening government. We win on all premises. Context properly given. Opening government, here.
All right, we thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech, and now we welcome the Leader of Opposition. Here.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, sure. So let me set up my timer. I'll begin very soon. All right, so I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the problem that we have with opening government's argumentation is that it's highly assumptive, right? So opening government begins this particular debate by saying that the problem in this particular debate is that women are limited some way in the society. The problem with that argument is that they don't show why that limitation of womanhood or women is directly linked to them having children. And this is very crucial, given that the debate says we are going to be actively encouraging women not to have children. So if you think that there's a problem with women or the women are facing a certain problem, they needed to show us why that was directly linked to womanhood. But more importantly, right, because we think that actively saying that women should not have children means that you're implicitly saying that it is better for women not to procreate. And this is really important because the POI I asked alluded to that. If you are saying that women should opt into not having children, it basically means that for those women who do engage in having children, you're basically saying that their choice is not right, and that for some reason they shouldn't believe in the idea of womanhood. We think this is something that's really important in this particular debate, because at the end of the day, if you're actively encouraging them to choose the other option, then you are saying that the alternative is worse off or something that is not preferable. A few things in this speech. First, why choice is important. Secondly, why womanhood is important. It's a huge utility for lots of women in today's debate, and why it's a legitimate claim to the conceptualization of womanhood. And then, yeah, basically that. But before that, a few responses, right? PM says that childbirth is used as a standard for assessing women, and that is bad. two responses here. First off, we don't think that this is something that we would support on our side, right? We think that in the world that we envision, women should not be limited to the amount of children they have or the fact that they've given birth. All that we are arguing from open opposition is that it should be open to women to be able to decide whether do you want to like opt into the idea of having children, or otherwise it shouldn't be in a situation where you're actively enforcing them to choose one over the other. But secondly, we don't think that the idea of childbirth in itself is limiting to women. That's to say, we find that certain individuals feel much more like happier and increased sense of agency by the fact that they have children and the fact that they can be able to control these children and change the society by educating these children and socializing them. We think this is a huge benefit that comes from childbirth and that lots of women actually believe in. So with that said, first argument, why before that, our alternative, right? What do we prefer on our side? We think that on our side, we prefer a world where you increase the education and the social narrative that women should not be limited by the number of children that they have. That's to say, in our world, we prefer a world where you don't encourage women to choose one over the other, but that you can put it in there that you can you create a situation where women believe that they can opt into it or otherwise. We don't think it should be one option that is a straight jacket for women to choose. This is something that we think is much more beneficial. But why is our alternative better off in solving the quasi problem the opening government talks about, right? Because we think that in the opening government's world, the problem they are talking about is unlikely to be solved. The reason why women are treated that way is not because they are giving birth, but because everybody in the larger society behaves like that particular way. That's to say, women behave in a way that entrenches patriarchy, men behave in a way that entrenches that particular patriarchy. In order to solve that particular patriarchy, you need to begin at the baseline, that's to say, the new generation that are coming up. You need to socialize them in a manner that makes them stop things like sexualizing women, catcalling women, etc., etc. But in the world of opening government, you don't allow that generic or social process to happen. In their world, they assume that just by forcing women or encouraging them to not have children, then men will start treating them better, that children will start seeing women as important in the society and as hardworking and not only limited by the number of children they have. We think that it is much more likely to be able to change that particular system if children are brought up by these particular women and then they can be socialized in a way that changes this particular social narrative, right? First argument on choice and why that is particularly important. First off, we think that women should have that choice to be able to decide what option they want. And we think that in most cases, deciding to have birth means that there's choice that exists for two reasons. Number one, because we've seen that women have shown increasingly that they can resist this socialization and social narrative, and they can show their preference. That is to say, in a world where you don't actively encourage these women, they can't be able to choose whether they want to have children or not. The argument that society forces them has by and large and far failed, and it's not necessarily true in the 21st century or recent time. Example is that most nowadays, women now focus more on their career and they're opting into things like contraceptives, etc., etc. And that means that women have shown that there's a possibility that they can control that particular social narrative, right? But secondly, because of the fact that there's increasing discussion about womanhood and femininity, and that most women are now engaged within this particular discussion, means that at the end of the day, in most cases, women have the choice to be able to say whether they don't want to have children or not. Notice on our side, we're not saying that socialization or that social pressure will not exist at all, but we are just saying that women can weather that social pressure and they've shown to be able to weather that social pressure. Secondly, we think that in most cases, women are and can be rational. Let's say this particular policy from opening government assumes that women do not know what is better for themselves and what is important for their own bodies. Given that the decision to have children is something that affects women's bodies, we do not think that this decision should be left in the hands of government, especially when most governments are made up of white, are made up of male patriarchal individuals that continue to enhance the problem of womanhood. This is problematic for two reasons. Number one, it diminishes women's agency because it assumes that women do not know what is better for their own bodies, the thing that they own. But secondly, it puts women under men's and society's control again, because if opening government says that women are forced to want to give children, it's the same thing that they are doing, right? Because in their world, they're actively forcing or encouraging these women and implicitly saying that you must do this particular thing. And we think it's again problematic because it diminishes these women's rights and allow them to come back under the control that opening government seems to think is problematic, right? Lastly, on womanhood and why that is a huge, like really important thing. We think that there are so many conceptualization of femininity and womanhood, right? And it moves from having children to having like polyamorous relationships, etc., etc. We think that there's an ability for the world to change. That's to say, for you to change the social narrative that oppresses women, if you allow people to be born and for these women to be able to control the kind of things that these children hear and these children like learn in that particular society. So we think that given that the world is becoming much more open to femininity, you're more likely to have parents and women socializing their children in such a way that you'll be able to prevent all the social ills that opening government is talking about. More importantly, we think that women should be able to choose this, and it's a legitimate choice for these women. For all of these reasons, very proud to vote.
All right, thank you, Leader of Opposition, for the fine speech. And now we call upon the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Please, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so yeah, a minute to begin my speech. Okay, so panel, please, am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I begin my speech in three, or actually like mischaracterizes what we say when they actually bring about the issue that opening government is actually like forcing women to actually choose one alternative over the other. Michael clearly said in his speech that we on side opening government are in no way against childbirth or procreation. What we are against is the narrative that women are supposed to give birth, or the narrative that society preaches about placing the glorification on like childbirth and stuff like that, right? So we on government bench are actively going to encourage women not to give birth. What we are saying, what we are actually saying does not mean that we are going to tell women to choose one option over the other, or like we are going to tell them to choose not giving birth over giving birth, right? In our world, women still are able to give birth. Women still have the choice to do so. What we want to do is break that societal narrative that suppresses women's choice of having to choose whether or not to give birth. And that is what we are actually tackling in today's debate, right? Yes. So panel, and what's it called? The idea that opening opposition bring about the fact that they are open to women to decide, and that the idea of what's it called childbirth is limited in our world is actually like really false, right? Because what do we say? We say that even in our world, women still do have a choice to actually give birth. So it is not something that is exclusive to their world. Also, the idea that childbirth is limited is largely false, right? Because as we tell you, women will still have the choice to give birth. What we are doing is creating a narrative that actually deconstructs the kind of socialization that has been like indoctrinated into these women, right? Panel, on to some rebuttals that they give, right? So first of all, they tell you that about educational measures that are actually going to cater for such narrative for women that they do not have to give birth, right? So it is a choice that they have to make. Also, when they tell you about the issue of the first century, only talk for like the few women who have actually been exposed to like
sorry,
educational.
am I the only one not hearing her?
Yeah, she's been breaking.
She's breaking. Okay. I stopped your timer at 2:10. Can we recheck if you're audible, Deputy Prime Minister?
Please, it's my time pause. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Please,
it's closed at 2:10 on my side.
Okay, so please, where exactly did you lose me at?
Like you were speaking about how like basically like it's not a choice, and you were like gonna start speaking about the rebuttals that the leader of opposition gave you.
Okay, so am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I continue my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the model OO brings about education is something that has already been covered by opening government. When we tell you that in our model, we are going to bring educational reforms that would actively tell women that you do not have to give birth, right? Panel, this covers like all educational, like all aspects of the educational ladder, right? From the very basics to the very top, to ensure that women from all like social standing are able to like actively are able to like receive this kind of information and know that they do have a choice, right? Also on their issue about choice and how women can actually resist it, especially in the 21st century, is something that is actually kind of flawed, because they only look or like they only focus on women who have been exposed to this, right? Women who have been educated. They forget and neglect the fact that we still have a lot of women who are yet to actually receive that kind of emancipation because of the fact that they live in areas that do not have access to education and stuff like that, right? And such areas are like the rural areas and then neglected parts of society that's like people are not really like exposed to what is happening in the world, right? You realize that even in Ghana, even in like certain towns and stuff like that, children as young as 16 years old are forced to give birth because of the narrative that if you give birth, that is what makes you a woman. And that is something that we actually want to solve, right? So their problem of like choice does not actually cater for that, and we do not buy that, right? Also, like onto like our substantive, right? So panel, we tell you that in a world where like the modern day narrative actually pushes that a woman can and have it all, can do it and have it all, it actually like creates this narrative that women are like superhuman beings that can actually like have successful careers and manage a successful home at the same time. Panel, we tell you that this actually places strain on women and stuff like that, right? So we believe in a world where women can choose to either decide to go in for just career or stay, become like housewives, or even like what's it called, have both worlds if that is what they believe they can do, right? And not because society tells them that that is what they can do. Yeah, POI, let me take you. See you, I'm listening.
So you mentioned, for example, like the early motherhood in Ghana, like such incidents are the main reason for this campaign. So if early motherhood is a problem, why you are not addressing it particularly? Why you are addressing whole motherhood in general instead of addressing that particular issue in a particular way?
Okay, I get you, right? What we are actually trying to solve here is the narrative in general, right? We tell you that those women actually do suffer the most, like those, like that is our main priority, right? But then we do not neglect the fact that even in societies where like women are actually have actually self-actualized and stuff like that, they still actually face that problem of the fact that they do have to give birth. That is why we give it. That's why I give you the narrative that about the modern day woman, where they are forced to like ensure that they are successful career women at the same time like good mothers, or like being able to like manage the homes, right? We told that this actually places so much strain and so much pressures on these women, and it is something that we do not want to condone or support, right? That is why we are actively going to ensure that these women know that they can decide either to actually take that road or not. They shouldn't actually do it because society tells them to do so. So panel, what does like Michael bring to you in today's debate, right? Panel, we tell you that if there is a problem in society and the injustice that have actually like women have actually faced, right? And there is a need to solve them. And this problem, like what's it called, transcends beyond what exactly is happening in the status quo. It is something that has actually been going on for so long, and there's a need for us to take a radical step to stop it. Because
I don't hear you.
Yeah, I
Start
think
my timer at 6:15.
that these courses have actually not worked, to ensure that there's like effective change, that the educational measures where we're actually going to educate.
Hello?
DPM. I stopped my timer at 6:15. Can you say something to? I guess she dropped. Yeah. Okay. Let's wait for like a minute or two.
No, okay, yeah. So panel, we tell you that women have actually like been socialized into thinking that giving birth is actually the best form of actualization, self-actualization that a woman can achieve, or like the highest point of like success that a woman can achieve, right? And panel, we actually regret this narrative because of the harms it has actually caused to women in society as a whole. Because of the fact that women who are able to give birth are actually like receive backlash or like are neglected in society, especially in our African, like in the African sector or in the African space, right? And it is something that we need to actually break away from or like try to solve. And that is what our model does, right? So we tell you about the educational measures, and then we tell you that we are going to lobby government policies to ensure that women get this, right? So opposition bet concerns about the fact that we are actually going to put women under like the patriarchal narrative and stuff like that. Right? We believe that is actually very flawed, because you realize that over the time there have been like what's it called? There have been policies that have actually been made to protect women, and this has in no way entrenched the patriarchal narrative that OO tries to preach, that if we buy into our world will happen. So we tell that their case is actually like flawed there, right? Pardon? Hello? Oh God.
Yes. Yeah, you're audible, but your time is done.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for their fine speech, and now welcome the DLO to close the open house. Here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, start my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Panel, notice that if you want to cancel narratives, you have to also push another narrative, an alternative narrative, very hard. So what is the narrative that OG talks about in this debate? OG says the narrative is that women are to give birth at all costs. What would be the alternative to that particular narrative? That will be that women should not give birth at all costs, which is actively encouraging women not to give birth. I don't know how OG tries to argue this narrative, and also in the same breath, tries to argue that they are not asking women not to give birth. I think that kind of characterization or that kind of definition in this debate is very, very like unfair, because then we can't have a debate. So I urge the panel to like dismiss that clarification that they tried to give by saying, oh, we are encouraging women not to have birth, but we are saying women should have birth. That is not what this debate is about. What this debate says, obviously from the motion, and obviously from most of the things that they've said, is that OG government is saying that women should not give birth. They're encouraging women actively not to give birth. And we, on the other hand, are saying that we think that that is a very bad thing. And what should be done instead was that women should be educated in order to be able to understand the various options that exist in order for them to make a right choice. So panel, notice how like that clarification itself is problematic and should not be ranked in this debate. So panel, what are you going to get from me in this debate? Two things. You're going to get rebuttals, you're going to get further analysis on what we have given you so far in this particular debate. So what's the problem that OG identifies? OG says women have been reduced to birth making machines. Panel, we say that that particular problem exists in the status quo, and we think that our world is better in solving that issue compared to the world that OG talks about. But OG says that two things. First off, women are being forced to do this. One of the reasons why women can't be forced to do this is because some women do not know the alternative, or are not aware that they have the right to be able to resist that force, that coercion, or whatever it is that society whatever burden society places on them. And that is why we think that education is better at solving that problem. But also realize that they talk about how socialization of society is what has caused this particular issue. I'm going to address that in my impact analysis, but a brief preview of what that is going to be about is one of the most important ways to destroy the patriarchy and ensure that this particular issue of socialization doesn't exist anymore is the active participation in socialization through motherhood, which is something that is exclusive to our side because we tell women that that is something that they can do through giving birth, which we don't get from OG or any government team in this debate. So panel, what do we say about like OG's case so far? So beyond like the direct rebuttals I'm going to get from my case, OG talks about how they think that, oh, this is a very radical issue and we need to have a very radical stance to solve the problem. Now, just being radical alone is not enough to guarantee solvency, right? They talk about radicalization and how it's important for us to be radical. And that in itself is not the case. I don't know why like they spend about 2 minutes on that. But then what is our alternative? So our alternative says that educates these women and presents them with the choice of choosing between giving birth and not giving birth. Here is what this debate, like where this debate gets very interesting. In a world where any of the government teams, CG, tries to argue that that particular style has been tried and has failed, I think that we need to like disregard that or discard that, because in places where this has been tried, we have seen great improvements, like in more liberal spaces where women have been told about their autonomy and women have been able to like appreciate who they are and what they can do. We have seen more growth. In places where like these examples we get from OG are given, rural areas in developing countries, we are not even trying at all. The contraceptives, etc., that we may even want to talk about may not exist in these places, and the education is not really happening as it should. So it is evident that there's a possibility that this is going to work because of like what we have seen in places where this has been tried, and in situations where this has not been tried, we can see like the kind of impact that has had on society. So panel, impact in this debate. Fattaw gives you 3 main things. He talks about choice, he talks about the unique opportunity of motherhood in destroying the patriarchy, and there's the narrative that they talk about, and finally, re-embracing the different forms of womanhood and how we ensure that everybody ends up being happy. So panel, the better choice by women, right? We'll tell you that in most cases, women are not told about the alternative. So the status quo that OG talks about is a world where women are told that they must give birth. What they talk about in their world is that women are told that they should not give birth. What we get in these particular words are one-dimensional arguments or a one-dimensional approach to dealing with this particular issue. What we prefer is a world where women are given all the options that exist and women are able to ascertain for themselves what option is best. What we then get is better choice and better like consent in everything that women do because they have the information necessary to take this choice. The problem with Gav's world is that we impose and limit women to what society wants, just like how they argue like it's happening in the status quo already, and that is exactly what they do. Fattaw has pointed that out very importantly. But second impact, we tell you that we are breaking down the patriarchy one baby at a time. Notice how socialization agents in like society are so many. Religion tries to socialize an individual, education tries to socialize an individual, family tries to socialize an individual. Notice how women then have a unique opportunity to cancel out the issues of religion, to cancel out things that we get from education and educational systems that are like majorly based on the patriarchy, and ensure that the new babies, the new children that are coming into this world are children that do not stand for these things that like have harmed women in the past. This also gives us the ability to hold mothers responsible for their actions in the upbringing of children, because if like the whole world has been against women for so long, or like there are parts of the world where women have not been given the opportunity, mothers need to take responsibility and begin to change that one baby at a time. And we think that is a unique impact to get from us, and it deals directly with the issue of socialization. But then panel, so we tell you that we appreciate the diversity of womanhood. Notice how feminism like some people try to like limit feminism to a particular style of living or particular style of being a woman. We think that that in itself is problematic to the feminist movement. And in this particular debate, we think that our world ensures that women who also find joy and derive joy in giving birth are also able to get that particular joy. But panel, in the closing half, if we get any issues on like population and resource scarcity, we tell you that that particular problem is not a giving birth problem, it's a management of resources problem and a corruption issue. And we think that we have been able to do with this debate very well, and we have created a world, or we have a world that solves the problem and makes the world better. It's been an amazing day to oppose. Thank you.
All right, we thank the DLO for that speech, and we welcome the member of government. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Give me a second, please. I'm trying to set my timer. Okay. Let's start in 3, 2, 1. Today, we're going to take a radical stance. We believe this motion is about pregnancy itself and many of the benefits, therefore, opening oppositions talking about is not exclusionary to their world, but in our world where we're encouraging women and continue like excessively encouraging women to not have children, we can still educate them that their identity is not dependent on having children. And also we can educate new babies too, because new babies are literally open to anything that they can receive by any institution, but by any individual, man, woman, or any other. They're going to receive the idea. So the important thing is not the person, but like the one who's receiving the right content. So new babies can be educated in any ways, and they can educate the babies who are adopted too. And also embracing different parts of femininity. I think some women can embrace it if it is like in their agency, but I think it is not really the best case, especially when we talk about the harms of getting pregnant and being pregnant. I think it is not a big benefit, but it is rather a very how to say, faded out one when it comes to the harm of getting pregnant. So what our world looks like. So we come from a very patriarchal system. So all the technology and the feminist movements and new the development has been a development of 100 years. Before 100 years, literally ingrained in what's ingrained in our DNA is patriarchal system and everything around it. No other technology or feasibility. So woman has no like option or feasibility to not have children, because if they're not, like, they are slaves, they're, I don't know, women who cannot protect like birth control. So like because they are wife of a man and they cannot have any birth control, they're literally giving birth every year or once in every 2 years. So there are historical habits too. So women are having children, and we see pictures, we see, I don't know, studies about it, of the historical studies. We see pictures on the caves. So as things develop, they start to literally get in our DNA, and we started to how to say, think that it is normalized more. So in the world where there is a huge burden comes from history, because it was feasible and it was necessary in that system, we have a huge, I don't know, manipulation that women somehow can give, like, can't, like, it's okay, and it's actually encouraged to give them birth. But it has very harmful effects on women, starting from physical exhaustion. If starting from 3rd month to the 9th month, they're carrying a huge burden, and this burden not only on a physical world but also on a psychological world. They change in hormones. They have exhausted a lot. So retardation of bone systems in the entire system, skeletal system and ossification system of women has to change, because they have to deliver the baby, or even if it's not going to deliver it in a natural ways, they have to, like, carrying of the baby is just like retarding the bones. It's retarding the muscle systems also. It's like your, I don't know, it's hard to describe it, but that your womb is expanding in a very weird way, that it's after giving birth, muscle system cannot come back, and the neural system too. So not only hormones and not only bones or muscle systems, skeletal systems, neural system change too. And there are studies that shows that the forgetfulness, and because neural system is damaged, that cannot be retroactively like bettered or healed, neural system like harms, and you know, forgetfulness and everything comes with that. It's actually have a very but big negative effects on women that you cannot bring, like, you cannot just heal or bring it back to the old, like the old form pre-pregnancy. It has psychological attachment, psychological exhaustion too, because of the attachment of the children. Even if there is no societal oppression or anything, the psychological effect to have a children on your womb is just, again, another burden on the children. So there are caveats. First, bodily capabilities weren't inherently good. It is just a capability, and also historical practices aren't make it inherently healthy or trustable. So what is the world we prefer after actively encouraging? So we prefer a a world where there's a decreased emphasis of having a glorification of having a children or pregnancy of children. Not now, I'll take it at 5. Yeah, 5. So less women manipulated to give birth and to left behind and to decrease inequality of men and women when it comes to the world of occupation and like academia or any other world. Yes, PY.
All the harms that you're talking about have been increasingly decreased by the rise in technology. It's not exclusive to your side.
Yeah, it is decreased, but it is still to a great extent, and it is greater extent for women to, I don't know, somehow feel that they're happy over having a children. I think it is still there to, like, it is, this study is a current study that a woman's brain is decreasing capability because of the shrink of the gray matter. And I think like technology is not going to develop within 100 years, and it is not actually like on the horizon that you can see everything that woman is suffering through pregnancy can be healed within 100 years. So will women feel exclude exhaust, like how to say, actively encouraging women to not have children? Will they feel like they're left out? Okay, that is the word. So I think it is not going to be the case, because when birth control came out, it was a capability of women to give children once in every year, once in every 2 years. And also women can give birth every year when they turn like 11, 12, and 13. Are they feeling inferior when they don't give birth through their 12 and 13 or 14? I don't think so. So because of their capability, they can do it, but they will not feel it is like very bad thing because we're like limiting them. And also it is not also capability, but throughout the how to say, how we advertise or how we're putting things to implement, right? I think it is not to inherent or like, I don't know, degrade or de-evaluate the entire existence of women. But even if some women feel that it is like in like devaluating them, it is due to the patriarchal system that they are valuable if they're giving birth, and they're valuable through their wand. And I think this is a system that we want to change, so it is not a big thing. After, I don't know, 50 years, it's not going to be a bad thing. So it is is it a bad decision for women? I think throughout history women didn't have option, and they have options, but it was very much, I don't know, like it was limited, but it is still things that you cannot control. If woman decides that it is not okay, there are third wave feminisms, the hatred was there, but women started to think that it is not okay if woman can go back to kitchen and like a family too. So right now, even if it's not going to be okay, women can have their own agency to give birth.
Time is over.
It is woman's idea to change that can come not through a patriarchal system. Vote for closing government. Sorry for the delay.
All right, thank you so much for that speech. Remember, guys, that after 7:15 we don't take notes, so don't lose your energy for nothing. We welcome the member of opposition. Here.
Good evening, everyone. So regarding today's debate, I want to mention one thing. Both the government, the opening government and closing government, still not reached on an agreement on what we are talking, because we are actually confused about, are we talking about birth control or are we talking about preventing early motherhood? So considering this confusion, we would like to stick on to the debate topic, like the case of actively encouraging women not to have children. And this argument have multiple problematic aspects. So we start with our few rebuttals that from the OG side. First of all, OG is addressing the issue of women as addressing women generally as a being which doesn't have any sort of agency. So what we can feel from the arguments of OG is basically trying to be the fathers of women. They are saying, you don't know this, so we know what is right, and you're supposed to we are obliged to manipulate or engage in your decision making through multiple ways. Because when we are talking about actively encouraging women, means it is a top down process. You are going to manipulate them through the advertisement, through the TV programs, to the movies, to campaigns. So you are basically, first of all, you are basically interfering in individuals' choice, and you are not letting women to make decision regarding their choice regarding motherhood. And of course, opening opposition made some good statement regarding that. And another thing is OG mentioned is they are trying to make a narrative to deconstruct the current social narrative. But they failed to explain the necessity of total deconstruction of the existing current narrative regarding the motherhood, because yes, we have issues women facing in the current society, but it has multiple aspects. It has a lot of capitalism is a reason for the issues women are facing nowadays. In previous time it was colonialism, and there are a lot of other social issues which actually acted as the prime cause of the issues facing by women, especially the women in third world countries like in Asia or Africa. And without addressing any of those issues, they are directly imitating the Western white radical feminist argument, and they are attempting to impose those arguments in the third world context or the African Asian context. And it is very problematic because of many aspects. One is we already discussed a lot in this debate, the problem of choice. The other is it is fundamentally bad for society, because all the societies are basically developed on the concept of motherhood. Like the woman and men get married, they will have children, so it constitutes the idea of family. And all the traditional societies, so majority of the societies we have now existing on the basis of this values and this social institution depending on motherhood. And in the many cases, especially in a lot of war-torn countries in Africa or Asia like Syria, the society is still existing only because of this institution. All other social institution in these countries destroyed or totally eliminated, and the only concrete establishment or institution which may give some life to these societies in these war-torn, devastated countries is the idea of family, which is fundamentally dependent on the idea of motherhood. And second problem is this motion, this idea of encouraging women to have not to have children is going to affect the country, the state and society in a very bad way, because it's not theoretically or it's not an abstract argument, because it's already happening in the many Western countries, include countries like Finland or Scandinavian countries. These states are facing huge crisis because of the lack of population. Recently, yesterday, Finland made a statement inviting around 50 to 100,000 new immigrants to their country because they lack workforce. And the main reason for this lack of workforce is the trend in those societies which basically discourage women to have children. So this policy already made a lot of nations in the West to depend on the immigration, and we know the after effects of rapid immigration to countries, because it caused multiple other problems. We are not going to discuss that issues. And another issue is the myth of women will have more freedom and more choice when they don't have a children, because it's an absurd argument. Because if you go and look into the statistics, we can still say women are facing abuses, violence, humiliation from their partners. Not necessarily has to be their traditional patriarchal husbands. They're already facing violence, humiliation from their boyfriends, their partner. You can call whatever you want. So this argument of woman doesn't have children experiencing more freedom is absurd, because that's what the statistics say. So in regards of that, we strongly opposing this argument of another thing is the socialization aspect, because most of the cases these kind of arguments only focusing on young women, and basically it is this argument comes from the capitalist psychology of to earn more, achieve more, a kind of an ideology based on the perpetual growth regarding the material aspect you accumulate throughout your life. And these arguments only addressing the young woman, And then there comes a question, what about the old woman? What about the women who are retired? There we already have a plenty of women who are facing isolation, depression after their 40s or 50s. So how you are going to solve the issues of those women? Are you going to put them in some random old age homes which have some mechanical social service programs? So this, when we consider the life total lifespan of an individual, whether it's or woman or men, especially in the case of women, this decision of not having children going to affect them in long term very badly, and it will put women in actually in isolation, because you are supposed to talk about women, you are not supposed to talk only about young women, because so considering these aspects regarding the challenges state going to face because of the after effect and the case of all women, and regarding the socialization, we are proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
All right, we thank the member of opposition for those fine notes, and we welcome the government whip to close the government side. Here.
Thank you. Couple of seconds, please. Start. Oh, sure. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, I want to thank you to all people. Also, I will take. I will say if I will get POS, so just do not disturb me, please. Firstly, we saw what we saw in today's debate. So we saw something really enough clarification from the government side. What is the meaning of actively encouraging, right? Despite the opposition sides did not get it enough, it seems. But I want to just clarify that opening government did not propose something powerful, something reasons why we are doing this, what are reasons that we are doing this, and what will be the world look like if we do that. So why it's needed. So we did not see something strong, but my friend just proposed many things like pregnancy effects, like the psychological effects, like the birth control, and the construction of the society without the ideas, without the knowledge of the woman, and without their decides, right? So like mentioning open comment mentioned about they have control over their bodies, like that, something like that. Or also they give some good answers to opening opposition, which I had to give one more time for making sure that they need to understand what are we standing. So firstly, it is not realistic for a woman to go work in a job in a normal way. For most of the women who have 3 or 4 children in the past of the world, in the most of the world. So it was proposed that so you can be more also socialized while you are having children. Come on, it's not realistic for the most of the world, because imagine the African, imagine or the something Indonesian or something poor countries like India. In the woman who has 4 children, 5 children, or 3 children, or let's say children, will also are able to socialize, or also will able to get some good education. It is not possible that we mentioned, my friend mentioned what are the reasons, like social, like the health issues, etc. So it's not realistic to say, okay, they can both socialize, etc. So it is not the case that we can, we need to actually tend to go through one side, which is we are encouraging this woman to just go with that way, because it's not realistic, as I mentioned, for this woman to just go just also work normally in the regards with the time they spent on their children. It's not realistic. Also, we are not, it is something significant, we are not taking the choice of the woman whether they want to make children or not. We are encouraging them. We are actively encouraging them because we are knowing people as we are the government. I don't mean that women don't know. Also, we are also studying for their education, that we want to make sure that they get really good education, but it is the reality for the most of the world, the third world countries, that they are not able to get enough education. It is the first thing. The second thing is, if even they get enough education, we are encouraging them through giving our reasons, and we are giving reasons. Look, this will happen if you do that. These problems will you face, or look, the construction of the society. We are giving them reasons, but here it is, we are encouraging this, but the right of choice is yours. So it is not the taking of their choice. It's not the case. The thing, we are not taking their autonomy, or we are we are giving them reasons to do that. So it is also not realistic for all people, all women, because they are not able to reach high education, because education was mentioned by the opening opposition a lot, but we are also giving education. So the crucial thing is that encouraging this is not against the promoting their education. We are on the side of both, but while we are giving also them, we are giving them reasons. So it is also education them. So we are on the side of our women, we are on the side of our people, you know, because we want to make sure that their conditions is that it is stable. So member of opposition, yeah. So yes, I mean the last closing opposition. So it is something like we are manipulating them, or it is something like top-down process. It was mentioned, right? But it is the, as I said, it is the reality of the world. It can be the something also top-down is something reality, but we are not giving them, okay, ensuring them, okay, here it is, just take this. You had to do that. No, we are encouraging them through giving reasons, our reasons, as we mentioned. So it is, we are not manipulating them. We are giving our reasons because we are thinking the well-being of the woman. So seeing that it is manipulating is absolutely not realistic for the third world countries, as closing opposition clarifies, right? Also, there's no problem of choice. As we said, we give them absolutely their own right of choice. They can, even if they want, they can make 10 children. We are not against this. So choice theirs, but we encourage them. Yeah, last thing, yeah, saying that it's capitalist system is here. So if many countries are standing upon the these children, these young people, right? Actually, it is not realistic for the most for the many countries as well, especially for the developing countries, that they want to make their population less. In fact, for example, let's look China, who is developing country of today's world. China, what is the Chinese trying? So be realistic opposition in this regard. Also, even if you say so it is make them demolished, it is not realistic. Even if they make less children for developing countries or not developed countries, it is not a problem because they will be not demolished. So it is not a problem, as you mentioned, but absolutely, as we my friend mentioned about the like pregnancy effects, birth control, and the construction of the ideas without asking women is something crucial. Also, closing opposition mentioned about freedom. We did not mention about freedom, by the way. It is weird that you just bring this up. For example, in academia, how much women we are seeing, it is the regard. Or we mentioned the word, how it will be. Also, many health issues like psychological effects of women. Vote for us. Thank you.
All right, we thank the government whip for those fine notes, and we welcome the opposition whip to close the debate overall. Here.
Thank you, dear panel. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so to begin with the opening government, the main argument the opening government offered us in this debate was that, you know, like as Bilal mentioned, it's like imposing and manipulating and running from one extreme to another. So you're basically, instead of neutralizing the situation as the opening opposition offered, neutralizing the situation is by, you know, offering neutral education, where you are offering all the choices and putting them on the table and giving full choice and full right to the women to choose whatever they want. As opposed to that, the opening government was constantly, trying to, and this is what we meant, by the way, like this is to, because the closing opposition was saying that, oh, why are you mentioning freedom? Well, we're mentioning freedom because when you are actively encouraging something, when you are constantly telling someone to do something, you are, as the opening opposition said, you're making the other choice less less of a right choice. You're making the other choice inferior choice. This is why we're mentioning freedom, because you're making something superior, or some group of people, or some choice superior to the other. This is why we mentioned freedom. Now moving to the closing opposition, Elif mentioned things regarding history and like evolution kind of thing, as far as I understood. Not precisely evolution, but the idea that we evolved now and we have technologies and we don't need to stick to the to the like what was necessary at the time, because they were hunters and gatherers, or they needed children because so many of the children died, so they needed to have so many children, etc., etc. And to be honest, like the argument is a little bit off the track, but I would like to still address it by just saying that even from an evolutionary perspective, when you have like things that have been ingrained, quote unquote, in the human nature for so long through evolution so that they can survive, even from an evolutionary perspective, it's very common sense that it doesn't change quickly. It doesn't change within 100 years. Even if you know that, oh, this is from the evolutionary heritage, or this is, like we don't need that anymore in our modern time, you still have to deal with it as it is, and you still have to act upon it, because it has a biological side to it, and you cannot change that biological side in a heartbeat. So even from an evolutionary perspective, that's kind of falsified already. And now moving on to the biological effects and psychological harms, and we would actually like to flip the table and say that in contrast, it is actually, there are so many researches that it is actually so much beneficial for women psychologically and physically sometimes, especially in terms of like, like when after, postpartum, like when like it's very, especially in terms of stress, like it's a stress reliever, and stress obviously affects the physical aspect as well. So both of them are, related anyway. And overall, it is very much, like well documented that you have so many benefits for the women themselves to have children. And if that wasn't the case, you wouldn't see any women, trying so hard to be pregnant and, to have a children. Why would you see that if that was, that evil and that scary and that harmful? Why are so many women desperately trying to, have children, and, like they're utilizing technologies like tubes and like having babies that are called tube babies, etc. So of course, it's not like what we are witnessing. We're witnessing the opposite. And on our side, the like how our world is actually better, especially in the context of, like comparative approach that we're talking about, not only, European system where having children might hinder the woman from, having a career, etc. We're saying that we have to take it as a whole package. We cannot like, just specify what the European societies are going through, because as Bilal mentioned, this is something that is related to so many aspects, and you have to change those aspects, and you will have this done and solved already. If you change the system of like, women in the first place being so degraded and so humiliated on a general level, not having, under the name of equality, of course, but it ends up, in comparison to, for example, an Islamic society where the father or the brother is responsible for financially supporting the woman no matter what, and this is like a kind of like bonus to her. So and this is of course another debate, but what we're saying is that it's not, it's like something that is related to the very general social and political system. So what's happening in the European society, vis-a-vis what's happening in like the other parts of the world, which are the majority, such as Asia, Africa, also the I mean, like, I'm not sure about China and Korea and this stuff, but it is generally the common and the status quo that women are continuing to have children. Women are loving that to a certain extent, as long as it's not compulsory. They're doing it. Everybody's happy. So why do you want to change that in such a radical way? I will take the POI before I. Okay.
Out of order.
Come on. So basically what we're saying is, again, to wrap up, we're saying that, first of all, this is against freedom, precisely because you are, like pushing one narrative against the other, and you cannot excuse that by saying, oh, in order to, like eliminate or, neutralize the situation, you have to run from one extreme to another, because it's not the case in all around. It's so complex, and it's so different in different parts of the world. So you don't have like a one dominant narrative in the first place that you want to push against. Like this, macro imagination does not apply in the micro individual level. On the micro individual level, you do need to be always neutral, and you do need to always provide education instead of like pushing one specific narrative over the other. And with that, I'm happy to oppose.
All right, thank you for that fine speech, and thank everybody for what was a nice debate. Now I will open the one. Okay, the recording started. Okay, hello. So thank you all for the nice debate. I think we all had fun listening to all of you guys. So how this oral adjudication will be going. First, I will give some general feedback regarding to how to deal with the motion, how to, expose yourself, and like, the main things that are somehow your burden in this sorts of debate. Second thing, I will be giving the call, and third, I will be going on different comparatives. So the first thing that I want to say on like a general feedback point is, when you're like, just define your burdens, and like even when you're trying, even if like the other teams are somehow intimidating on terms of like putting so much burden on you and stuff like that, it's pretty much easier or like helpful to just define what your burden is, or like what metrics are you working on. The second general feedback that I want to say is, especially when you are bringing new cases, and this is like mainly an advice for closing teams, is to make sure that you're linking not only your case or like the new framework or the new facade of development that you're bringing on argumentation, but also to show me why your case is more important. Because I think on several occasions, what made the difference between the opening teams and the closing teams is having the weighting and having the significant comparative and engagement with the opening half. So in order for you to place your extension or something above them. Having that said, we gave on a consensus at the end, the unanimous call, and make sure that like we went over all the comparatives. We gave first to OO, second to OG, third to CO, and unfortunately fourth to CG. Why is that so? So I will start this comparatives, or like this oral adjudication comparatively. So first, we get few things from the opening government. We get that like there is a lot of injustice done to women, and there is a cultural pressure, and this is like how the framework went, and like that the society is somehow like have been marginalizing women and mistreating them for a long period of time. And then they give us like a model on how education will allow them to buy onto the idea of having full ownership on their body, and allow them to go on to self-fulfillment, self-actualization. Then they give you like, the separate, like, they keep on developing on the same network. But what the problem here and why OO is taken over OG, because first, let's just say what OO is bringing us. So OO is giving you like four main things. One is like why choice is important. Second is why one womanhood concept, especially when you're rated to childhood as a setting up to womanhood in culture, is still something that like that women have to decide it at the end of the day. But also like they give me more like about body sovereignty, the gender roles in hierarchy is different from giving birth, and also like that there is like they give me an analysis on like the options, the career focus, and that woman and the rationality. And also they give me like about preventing other areas of like that this is like pretty much exposed. So by the end of the day, I still couldn't see if I had the case of OG independent from the case of OO, then I can see that like, oh, OG is right. There are some problems. But then like when you're comparing both of them, I don't see why the case that OG is bringing me is exclusive to the fact that if you want to solve these problems, or like, you know, if you want to have a better society on terms of women rights, or on terms of like feminism, etc., that this should be exclusive to not having children, or to encourage women to not have children. So we ended up giving it to OO over OG on these different things. So also like, you know, we think that like why OG takes over CG, right? So we think that like the case of CG, and this is like something that was pretty much discussed in the deliberation room, is how far does the case of CG relate to women having birth or not? So the thing is that like why OG, why we think that OG is taken over CG is that like some, for example, the historical development of how women have been like, you know, marginalized and stuff like that is not exclusive to CG. It was already mentioned several times by OG, but also like when you are bringing a new facade, for example, the physical harms or the psychological harms that are brought on women in the period of pregnancy, and you narrow them down, you need to show me why, for example, the pregnancy is like, you know, the most crucial part of like, you know, that's the biggest harm that like the status quo is given to women, and that's why you want to change it by encouraging women not to have children. And so the thing is that like pregnancy is not, we still at the end of the day gonna get why pregnancy should be placed over other issues that are mentioned on OG and stuff like that, and why this harm that comes only in pregnancy is the main incentive that would like push the government to support the policy, or like, you know, to have the understanding of like women should actively that this house would actively encourage women not to have children. So furthermore, what I get from like, you know, CG as well is how like, and yes, when I compare the case of CG now with the case of OO, I think that like OO already flags out the problems also in their PIs about like what are these harms like really still something that, you know, is prevalent in today's society because technology is developing and stuff like that. But even if I don't buy this PI and how effective it was on the case of CG, because CG spends a lot of time trying to explain the psychological harms as well of how, for example, you know, like this is a lot of pressure and stuff like that. I think that CG didn't engage much with like, you know, the main things that like, you know, open opposition is explaining to us on how choice is important, and how you cannot just by manipulating or like, you know, pushing forwards for women to actively not have children, how this is going to be beneficial for feminism or for women, etc., etc. So like the main case that I get from CG is something that is like a description of how pregnancy is harmful for the woman, but I still don't see how it is like, you know, gonna benefit if like, you know, I still don't see why these harms that come in pregnancy are a valid reason, or like the most important reason in this debate to for us to accept that women should be encouraged not to have children. But on the OO side, I still get like, you know, the model, I still get like, you know, the alternative that like, you know, for example, if you want to push for something, you need to push for something that is harder, another narrative, and this is not give birth at all. And they explain to me the social constraints of this in terms of like, you know, for example, education, and like also they flag out the principle that like, or the idea or the basic logic of like, you know, if like, for example, even when you compare them with OG, it's something about like that if you want to change something, this is that like they took the words of OG and they flipped it. And this is also another reason that you can add on why OO is winning over OG. If you want hard problems, you need hard solutions. So like the thing is that like when OO is using this to show me this is why you cannot have this narrative, or like you cannot have this policy of like encouraging women not to have children, because now you're just like, you know, ruining a lot of things, and you are even like hating on the principle of women being strong and independent, and somehow like, you know, like independent on their own body, and like that's why they own their body and stuff like that, because they still have choice and they still have a concept of womanhood, etc., etc. Now bringing CO into this debate. So far I did the comparative between OG, OO, and CG, and showing how like both the governments went over CG. Now I'm bringing CO, and I will do the comparative with other teams as well. So firstly, why does CO get over CG? I think that like the main reason why CO gets over CG is on engagement. I think that like CO successfully like engage with the case of CG, especially on terms of like, you know, for example, either like the body things that technology is already doing, but also like on psychological part, they're engaging more and trying to flip the arguments of like CO, CG having like more psychological harm. So by the end of the day, when you think about it, especially on the long term and how this affects women, we can see that CO is winning on the metric of like psychological harm that is like, you know, put on women on terms of like, for example, on the long term when she's lonely, when she is like this and that, and how this also affects society. So the impact that I get from CO were pretty much relevant in terms of how this affects society as well, on terms of like, you know, for example, now Scandinavian countries or Western countries that are still having the women that are not like pretty much like fasting from having children and stuff like that, they were still having a crisis on terms of like, you know, things like that. But even like why I didn't credit this over, for example, the OO or the OG case, because I think that the society issues and something like that are not the main issue of this debate, are not the main incentive why you should like suppress women rights. So the thing is that like why CO lost to both the opening half teams is that they are not bringing women or like, you know, mothers as a main stakeholder in this debate, and they're speaking about the society in general. It's good to speak about the macro level, but you still, in order for you, it's not that I'm saying that that argument is not relevant, but I'm just saying that it's not showing me how this affects the main stakeholder in this debate, or like how this affect the main thing in this debate. So even like, for example, what like I still found it counterintuitive on terms that like, you know, yes, but why does it have to be only the burden of women to handle the societal problems and stuff like that? So like I think that a link was missing on the side of CO. Now bringing like OO versus CO comparative. So I think like after all what I said about OO, I think that like CO was pretty much a bit like, you know, just taking what OO said and giving me an analysis and like, you know, a definition of like how things happen in the society, although they bring new things, such for example, like, you know, the problems in society and stuff like that. I couldn't credit it more than what OO brought me, especially on the choice and the sovereignty of the body, or like, you know, having all of the other things. So yes, yeah, I guess that was it. If you guys have any questions.